So yeah, I lasted like 2.5 seconds trying to do the Guile Saber video, and I was like, you know what? Let me just start alternating between classes and doing other servants that I actually want to cover and that you guys actually want to see get covered as well. I'll get around to Guile Saber eventually, I promise, but since I'm kind of just starting off this series, I think I actually want to start hitting servants that I think are legitimately really good and that every player should level, and Euryale definitely fits those requirements for me. In fact, on the JP version of the game, I even grailed her to level 80, because she was just very, very helpful in a lot of situations. Longtime players will know that she has a very strong anti-male niche, and in fact, in earlier portions of the game, you were able to, like, charm lock people if you used the Gorgon trio, which is really funny. But unlike, say, Caesar, who we covered yesterday, Euryale actually has a bit of a more complete kit. Again, not to, like, kind of dunk on Caesar or anything, but as you'll notice, we can actually, like, talk about all of these skills, and they're actually still pretty good to this day. They're not super complex or anything by comparison, but they're just more holistic to her kit, I guess is a better way to word it. And so we'll talk about all that and more in today's video. But before we actually begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet, sweet daily FGO content. And if you want to see your boy play FGO live, I do that every weekday. That is linked down in the description down below, usually starting at about 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and start diving into this servant, starting off with her hits. And again, like Caesar in yesterday's video, Euryale is one of those year one servants where they kind of just gave them really wonky hits. Like, I guess 3 hits on both of those quick cards are good, but she's not a quick servant, and her star gen is pretty low at 7.9%. Her NP gain is pretty high at 0.9%, but again, she only has 2 hits on both of those arts cards, and thankfully someone like Castoria can massively gas up her NP gain with, you know, the targetable arts buff, the extra NP gain and stuff like that, so it kind of helps her bottom out. But even if she's getting crits or something on those arts cards, and I have no idea how on earth you're going to do that unless you're like slapping 20-30s on both of your Castorias. But even those crits, I found to not be very impressive when it comes to actually refunding her NP. It's like passable. It's not super insane, but it's like decent, right? And even her extra attack's not super great at only 3 hits on the extra attack, which isn't super good even for Brave Chains. But again, like Caesar, that's because, you know, she's not designed like some of these more modern servants like Van Gogh, where you just want to start spamming her quick cards all over the place, or Super Orion, who's just designed to just crush people with his triple buster deck. Euryale's built around her NP being able to absolutely crush and decimate male servants, and even then she can still put up some really good numbers even against like non-male enemies. But before we can talk about the NP, we gotta talk about the skills, and her first skill is actually pretty strong even by today's standards. It's not like nuts to butts broken or anything, but the fact that she can reduce enemies' NP gauges by 1 to give her a little bit of that survivability technically, and then she has a 27% battery if you take this all the way to level 10, is pretty nice. Now, realistically, if you have like a K-scope or something, or even like a max limit broken imaginary element, you can afford to take it to either level 4 or level 9 respectively. But it is still nice to see like an older servant having this, right? Having the ability to kind of control the fight with their ability to lower an enemy's NP gauge. Although, granted, it is an 80% chance, it's not guaranteed. And I always say if it's not 100%, it's probably 0% in FGO. That also might be like my PTSD from playing Pokemon Showdown back in the day and missing like 80 Fire Blasts in a row, and it's a 75% chance, but that's a whole topic for another day. It's still nice that she at least has the ability to do this, because it's kind of like the one thing that like a double Castoria team lacks. Now, you can say that like, well, if I do like Castoria plus Waver or Castoria plus Tamamo, I have the ability to like reduce enemy NP gauge, but if anything, it's not bad to have other people that can also do this and give your entire team technically more survivability, because you can deny the enemy their NP and potentially buy yourself another turn. And again, the battery is a little bit weird. I kind of hope they buff this someday and just like make it a nice even 30%. Like, it bothers me that it's 27%. It's like Karna and Arjuna having a 25% battery. It's like, okay, unless you have imaginary element, you're not really doing anything with that. But again, it's a very strong open to her kit. Her second skill is a little situational because you have the opportunity to charm 1 male enemy for 1 turn. Now, it says 100%, but that's not actually 100% even in FGO, because this is a debuff, and people in FGO have passives that sometimes give them debuff resistance. And so let's say you're going up against a Saber that, you know, has magic resistance A, and they have a 20% debuff resistance. you basically have like an 80% chance to charm them. And it's only restricted to male enemies, so if you're fighting any female sabers or a female berserker or something along those lines, this skill is pretty much dead. Again, I kind of want them to buff this one as well to give it some utility. Like, you can keep the charm one male enemy, but like maybe just also reduce their arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns or something along those lines. But granted, you are pretty much always going to break Euryale out whenever you're fighting a male enemy because of the damage mod on our NP. So, well, yeah, if you're fighting some like random Joe Schmo like Fran Saber or something, you're not going to be able to proc this on them. But again, you're probably going to bring her to fight males anyway because that's where she actually shines. Her third skill is actually added to her because she didn't drop with a third skill, because I don't know, DW was just like, yeah, 3 stars and below don't get their third skill for whatever reason. And thankfully, it came at that really good sweet spot when DW actually started to learn what they were doing and kind of how to make servants decent, because it's just a flat 30% arts buff for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. This is kind of just what the doctor ordered for her because it gave her just that little bit of extra damage and that little bit of help to her arts cards, which also buffs her NP gain. So that way she wasn't like, well, I fired my NP and I'm never firing it again because I can't get back to it. And so now between this, the battery, and the fact that Castoria is really OP and it, like, just allowing any servant to pretty much get back to their NP just because of the raw NP gain she just puts into everybody, plus, you know, the battery and the raw arts buff. It all culminates and it makes it a bit easier for Euryale to get back to her NP, even if you're just firing her arts cards without crits. Again, not super insane or anything because the hits are super low on our arts cards, but it does make it possible to actually fire a 2nd and 3rd NP. Speaking of that NP though, let's go ahead and talk about it. So the first thing that I think I need to address is that first part right there where it says deals 1200 damage to the enemy. Now, some people might be confused as to what that is. That's actually the multiplier, like the damage mod for her NP. And usually you'll see like, oh, they do like 1200, then 1400, then 1600, like that scales with the NP level. She just gets the raw scaling as an actual effect of her NP. And now that's a little bit whack because usually if you were going to rank up an NP, she should actually have 1600 if you look at like other, you know, single target servants and how their damage scaling works. So she's getting shafted a little bit on like the raw damage department. It's still fine and she could still put up some decent numbers, but they kind of traded that out for the damage mod against males. So usually damage mods are the overcharge, but for Euryale, it scales with her NP level, which is actually kind of insane because you can get up to 250%, which is very uncommon. For the most part, you're going to see damage mods being about like 150%. They can scale up, but it's not usually likely because you can't get to like overcharge 5 consistently. And then you have very rare cases like MHXX, who has a 200% free special damage mod, but Euryale has a free 250% special damage mod because it scales all the way to her NP5, and she's, you know, basically a free-to-play servant, and it hits all the males in the game, which is like half the servants in the game. And then on top of that, her overcharge is scaling her charm, so if you didn't get the one on her 2nd skill, this one actually scales with overcharge and gives you an additional chance to try to lock them down, going from 100% to 200%, while also for any enemy, regardless if they're male, female, or Astolfo, it can reduce their attack by 20% for 3 turns. So also every time she's firing her NP, and if you can kind of keep it consistent, you can kind of always have the enemy somewhat charmed and at like a 20 to 40% attack down for the rest of the fight, which is really strong. And it's why I always recommend Euryale to a lot of new players. I mean, not only is she absolutely adorable, and if you read Okeanos, you probably already leveled her up anyway, but she's actually just legitimately a good servant. I mean, I wouldn't have grailed her on JP if I still don't break her out for certain scenarios. Are there better options out there? Most definitely. But not everybody's going to have someone like Artoria Archer or Anastasia. You might have missed out on getting Chloe, and until they bring out the main interlude for the Ilia event, you're not going to be able to get Chloe, and so then Euryale kind of becomes a really nice free-to-play option if you need a single target arts archer. There's also Robin Hood, but we'll also talk about Robin Hood later. I think that's actually kind of a good discussion you could have, is whether you want to level up and use Robin Hood more or Euryale, but I just say level them both up because they're both really strong. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, I did say that I would give characters ratings, and I definitely think I would give Euryale that gold star. I think she's actually really, really strong. Her kit is like pretty much nigh complete. If they just like patch up the battery a little bit, actually add an effect on the 2nd skill that hits non-male targets, or maybe just gives her even more incentive to be used against male targets, Like I said, maybe also hitting them with like an arts resistance down or just flat out lowering their defense, something along those lines. I think she'd nearly be like a complete servant. So we'll see what they do with her in the future, but I definitely think she's one of those servants that you should definitely level up. And again, she's a 3-star. Like, even if you're broke on QP, it shouldn't be that much to actually level this girl up. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, let me know who you want to see me cover next. We're kind of in a bit of a dry period right now with FGO, with Scramble wrapping up and still waiting for the new Morgan Lotto event to actually drop. So really, until Wednesday, we could just keep talking about these free-to-play servants, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. But I've rambled enough. I'll catch you guys tomorrow in the next video. Peace, late guys.